Welcome! Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on something that pretty much shapes everything we see on screen, from massive blockbuster movies all the way down to the videos in your daily feed. Think of it like a hidden language in our visual world. And trust me, once you learn how to see it, it's really hard to unsee it.
I mean, really think about it for a second. Have you ever been watching a movie or a show and just got this feeling that there's a very specific, kind of repetitive way female characters are framed or positioned? A kind of visual shorthand that just feels familiar? Well, you're not imagining things.
So that pattern, it's not just some big coincidence. Nope, it's a well-known phenomenon, and it has a name and a really powerful theory behind it. So let's take a look through that lens.
Okay, so our story here starts almost 50 years ago. There was this film theorist, Laura Mulvey, and she was watching the same movies as everybody else, but she was seeing something much, much deeper. She saw a system, a structure, and in her totally game-changing essay, Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, she gave it a name, and boy, did it stick.
So, what is this thing she spotted? What exactly is the male gaze? Let's get right to the core idea that completely flipped how we analyze movies, TV, you name it.
And there it is, the male gaze. So what Mulvey was arguing is that mainstream film is basically built around a default masculine point of view. It presents women not as characters, really, but as passive spectacles, things to be looked at. They're framed in a way that's specifically designed for the pleasure of a straight male viewer. Now, Mulvey wasn't just pulling this idea out of thin air. She was building on work from thinkers like the art critic John Berger. Just a few years earlier, he summed up centuries of Western art with this zinger: men act and women appear. The idea is so simple, but it's also incredibly profound. Men are the ones doing things, driving the story forward. And women, well, women are the sights to be seen along the way.
Okay, so we've got the what. But what about the how? How does a theoretical idea like a gaze actually show up on our screens? Well, Mulvey broke it all down for us. She laid out these three interconnected perspectives that all sort of line up. So first, you've got the gaze of the male character inside the movie, looking at a female character. Second, there's the camera's gaze. You can think of it as the director's gaze, which shows us the scene from that same masculine viewpoint. And third, there's our gaze, the audience, because we're encouraged to see things through the eyes of that male character in the camera. It's like a circuit, and we're the final piece. But the gaze isn't just about making things sexy. It also works by setting limits. A sociologist named Gay Tuchman had a term for this: symbolic annihilation. It's this idea that when women are just constantly shown in these trivial roles, as decorations or damsels in distress, it sends a message that they're less important. So it's not just how they're seen, it's also about how they're not seen, as complex, active heroes of their own stories.
But hey, like any huge, groundbreaking theory, Mulvey's work wasn't the last word on the subject. Not at all. It was actually the start of a massive conversation. And over the decades, it's faced some really important challenges. So where does the theory maybe fall a little short? Well, probably the biggest critique is that the original theory made some huge assumptions based on the world she was looking at back in the 70s, right? Her whole analysis was centered on a straight male viewer, it was focused on a very specific type of Hollywood movie, and it didn't really leave much room for how women themselves might create or see these images differently. People started to ask, and rightly so, okay, but what about literally everyone else? And to dig into that a little more, critics basically said the theory was a bit too rigid. It didn't really have a good answer for how women or queer audiences or reviewers of color might see the exact same image and get something totally different from it. It also couldn't have predicted a future with so many female directors or with social media where women are both the creators and the subjects of their own images all the time.
Which, of course, brings us to today. The world of 1975 feels like a lifetime ago. We're swimming in a sea of media, TikTok, streaming, a creator pool that's way more diverse. So the question is the male gaze even a thing anymore?
Yeah, this is the big one. With all the massive changes in our society and our media, did this way of seeing things just evaporate? Or did it just change its disguise? Well, according to a lot of people who study this stuff, the gaze didn't disappear, it just adapted. It got more covert. The really obvious, almost cartoonish way women were sexualized in older media has been mostly replaced by more subtle, but still powerful kinds of objectification that fit in better with today's social rules. And if you want a really concrete example, just look at recent media research. Analysts have actually measured a shift over time, a move away from the super obvious framing of women's chests to a more coded, you might say covert focus on their backsides. So the technique might change to keep up with the times, but that underlying principle of framing a woman's body for an assumed viewer, it's often still there.
But of course, that is not the whole story, not by a long shot. The rise of what some people are calling a female gaze, led by amazing women directors, plus the explosion of self-representation on platforms like TikTok, are actively fighting back against that old framework. The power to make and share images is in more hands than ever before, and that creates this constant push and pull against that traditional way of seeing. So we'll leave you with this thought. The male gaze is a lens. It's a tool you can use to analyze what you see. And once you learn how to put that lens on, to spot the camera angles, the way characters are positioned, the story choices, it can be really, really difficult to take it off. So now that you can see it, do you think your media will ever look the same again?